All right, here's the last lesson of our little mini unit on intro to functions. And we're going to talk about an inverse. Really not too much I can say until I get to a problem, but we're going to do inverse of a function. Okay, so let me show you the first example. All right, so the basic definition of an inverse, it means, like, let's say, actually, before I even do this problem, let me mess around a little bit for you. Let's say instead of having an equation like we have here as the function, let's say this was it was just a list of points. It was 1 and 2 and 3, 7, and 5, -1, whatever. That was the function. Like, it's just some weird list of points is the function. Well, this kind of tells the whole story what's going on here. The inverse of that would be this. That's it. All an inverse means is to switch the x and the y. You're just swapping the x and the y. Okay, so notice I've swapped those. That's -1 right there. So, if that's the definition of an inverse, is to just switch the x and the y, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write this as y equals. Like that. Basically, when we have a function notation, this is just a fancy way of representing the other variable. You plug things into x and you get an answer that would be this thing. So we can also just think of that as our y value. Second thing we do is the definition of inverse, which is we're going to switch the x and the y. Remember I said that's what an inverse is to switch the x and the y. So we're going to switch them like that. Oops, I messed up. Hold on. Right there. My bad. Okay, so we've switched the x and the y. I have the x went over to the y came over here. Okay. And then finally, we need to solve it for y again so that it's back as a new function. So we're going to, this thing is a function notation. It's really y equals. Well, when you switch the x and the y, you no longer have it as y equals. You have it as x equals. So now we got to solve this. This is the actual work is right here. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. So we get x plus 3 equals -3y. And then we're going to just divide everything by -3. So we divide that by -3 to make that go away. And we can just write it. There's a couple ways we can write this. I'm going to go ahead and write it where we put everything divided by -3. So we get y equals -1/3 x minus 1. Look at that closely. This is 1. This is a 3. That's the 1/3 part. There was a negative here, but not here, so it's just negative. A positive over a negative is negative. And then notice another positive over a negative makes a minus, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. And that's it. So we had this original function was this, and now we have the inverse, which is this. And one more thing is we can rewrite it. When we're all done, it wasn't really y equals, it was h of x. So the way we write inverses is h -1 of x equals -1/3 x minus 1. And that's not the power of, that's a label for inverse. Original inverse. -1. You put it above there like that. Alright, let's do it again. The steps are rewrite this as rewrite the original function as y equals. Swap the x and the y, or in this case it's the n. Swap the n and the y. Could have been an x, but it's an n. So we go n equals 5th root y minus 2. And then the third step is solve for y. So steps are f of x or h of n or whatever you want to call it becomes a y. Okay. Then second, that's step 1. Step 2, swap x and y, or n and y, or whatever. Okay. Step 3, solve for y. That's the steps to finding an inverse. Really the only actual step where you're doing work is this third step. We now have to solve, we got to get this back to y equals. We have a fifth root around this thing, so we have to kill that. To kill a fifth root, you do a fifth power. Those will now cancel out, but you can't just go around fifth powering unless you do the other side fifth power. So now we have n to the fifth power equals y minus 2. Not too bad. I mean, it looks all crazy because of this fifth root, but really you just put a fifth power on it, and now you just have that. That all cancels each other out right there. Of course, by doing that, you created a fifth power over here. Solve for y, just add 2. So you get y equals n to the fifth power plus 2. And then when you're all done, you have it y equals. You want to rewrite it nice as h inverse of n equals n to the fifth plus 2. That last step there is really just it's just rewriting it so you answered the question nicely. One more. I don't think they really get any easier or harder. They're all just kind of a little bit different. This isn't anything overly stressful. Step 1. Rewrite the original function as y equals, like so. Step 2, swap the x and the y. Step 3, solve for y. In order to solve this one for y, here's the y, you've got a squared, it's all in parentheses and it's squared. You've got to get rid of that squared. So we're going to square root. We're kind of doing the opposite of last time. So we have square root of x equals y plus 2. So inverse, the pure definition in algebra class is inverse means to swap the x and the y. But in life, inverse kind of means opposite or whatever, and that's kind of what's happening here. You'll see that here in a second. Our final step is to subtract 2. So we have square root of x minus 2. And then we rewrite it f inverse, that's my little inverse there, of x equals square root of x minus 2. Now back to what I was saying. Inverse, algebra, pure definition, we're swapping x's and y's. But that leads to what you kind of think of as the word inverse, which is opposites. Because when you resolve it, like we are here, when you resolve this for y, again, notice that the original had a plus in it, this has a minus. The original was squared, this is now square rooted. It used to be all in parentheses, now it's two separate pieces. There's definitely a connection and an opposite idea between these two things, but it came from the swapping of the x and the y, which is really what's going on with inverse. That should be enough to get you going. I'm back tomorrow, Friday, so you should be watching this video on Thursday evening sometime. So any questions you have on this lesson or any of the other previous lessons will definitely be taken care of Friday, tomorrow. All right, work hard, be nice. See you soon.